Who shut down Wall Street, the military, and the courts for 8 days straight in 1970? Your friendly neighborhood mailman, of course. The Great Postal Strike of 1970 goes down in history as the largest ever strike by federal workers in the US, when 210,000 postal workers truly went postal and shut the country down. Even more incredibly, it was completely illegal too, and would ultimately rewrite the law itself. With no union recognition or right to strike, the politicians basically thought that they could kick these workers around with no consequence. This fight came after decades of what the postal workers called collective begging, making pleas to Congress and the president to raise their poverty wages, address inhospitable and unsafe conditions in mailrooms, and finally recognize their union, but the government consistently failed to act. It even required an act of Congress to raise their pay, and so it was often neglected by both parties. This made postal workers some of the lowest paid government employees, with many qualifying for food stamps just to survive and support their families. It all reached a boiling point when Congress proposed a 4.1% raise after years of stagnant pay. Meanwhile, Congress was approving a 41% raise for themselves. The union leadership, which had no recognized right to bargain at the time, told the government that if they pushed these workers too far, there'd be an illegal strike and that there was nothing that they could do to prevent it. Then, just like they said, the strike broke out first in New York, and the system that moved 270 million pieces of mail a day soon came to a halt. Wall Street transactions ceased and shut down the whole financial sector. Draft notices to young men being sent off to Vietnam weren't being delivered, and most court documents, medical paperwork, and anything else that you can picture going through the mail stopped. President Nixon began to panic and ordered the military and the National Guard in to deliver the mail themselves, which failed spectacularly.
Do you think you're doing it as fast as a postal worker?
No, I don't. No. He must have his own little tricks because I can't find half the slots.
The government came, hat in hand, and negotiated with the union for the first time in the service's nearly 200 years of existence, granting them a substantial pay increase and union recognition. Remember, this action was completely illegal, and yet they did it anyway. Why were these workers so ready to strike and break the law, despite the threats of jail time and major fines? We gotta remember the world that they were living in. In the decade before the strike, these workers saw mass actions of civil disobedience for the civil rights movement and the anti-Vietnam War movement, where millions of workers across the country broke unjust laws and shut it down. Especially black workers, who were some of the most militant in the strike, brought that experience with them to the pickets. People could see it, plain and simple. It was the same masters who held down their wages, upheld white supremacy, and sent them off to die in Vietnam. These workers went toe-to-toe with the US government and walked away with their heads held high, showing the power of this sleeping giant walking our streets every day. Their victory reminds us, if the law tries to bend our struggle, then our struggle will need to bend the law. And the US government should never forget the power these workers hold, especially when they have no choice but to use it.